Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is the show where we take a look at every classic Doctor Who story, plus a bunch of big Finish audio dramas, one episode a day, 7 days a week. And today, on the 16th of October 2019, I'm starting a look at the penultimate Tom Baker story. The second to last Tom Baker story, The Keeper of Traken, which is by yet another new author. There's only like 2 returning authors in this season, and it was, which sort of really contributes to just the feel of the season being so different from other Doctor Who stories. Mainly, you have the other seasons where you would have, even when a new producer took over, there would be returning authors. Just the tone would be different. Like the entirety of Tom Baker's first season, which was when Philip Hinchcliffe and Robert Holmes took over, that was nothing but returning authors, yet there's still a marked shift in the tone of the stories. But this one, the tone is changed by just having so many returning authors. The Keeper of Traken was written by a man called Johnny Byrne, who would go on, I think, to write he would write a couple more stories for Doctor Who after this. But The Keeper of Traken, starting with part 1, it actually has an really interesting premise. Basically, there's this planet, it's not really a planetary system, it's just a bunch of planets that have this sort of union, and it takes up this sort of corner of the universe that basically radiates goodness, which is this interesting idea. It's like this. The Doctor says it they all get along by just all being terribly nice to one another, it's a fascinating idea for a Doctor Who story, just to set it on a place where everything is nice to one another. It also kind of justifies nothing really dangerous happening until the very end. We start with the Doctor and Adric in the TARDIS, and then this old dude in a chair who is the Keeper of Traken, who's basically their leader. He holds everything together by sitting in this chair, and he has incredible psychic powers that are nearly godlike. And he just sits in this chair and is basically in charge of this planet while the rest of the people live there. And he's basically coming to the Doctor for help because it's basically like a little bit of evil has gotten into the planet. It's not there's some evil mastermind. No, there was this years previous, this statue type thing called a Melkur arrived on the planet, and it sort of became frozen in place in just this glade on Traken. It's because it's like this in calcified, and then this woman Cassia, who basically tends to it because she's just being nice, it's evil, but it deserves to be. I guess it's it deserves to be loved, kind of is the idea here. So I'm just gonna take care of it, and it's gonna be nice. But I guess its evil is either radiating outward. It starts to it by the end of this episode it has moved, and the cliffhanger involves it moving, and the Keeper declaring the Doctor and declaring it evil, because when the Doctor and Adric actually arrive on the planet, they're of course captured for being outsiders, because it's they're suspicious. They're the ones who must be bringing some sort of evil to Traken. So they are brought to the Keeper, who then declares them evil. But he's actually declaring the Melkur behind them as evil. And that's our big cliffhanger, which it's a pretty decent cliffhanger. It raises questions if this place is so nice and so peaceful, why do they have guns? Shouldn't they not know war and things. Like, it's just like, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But overall, this is still a decent one. It's a good start to the episode. We also get introduced to a bunch of other characters. There's this character called Tremas who marries Cassia, and his daughter Nissa, played by Sarah Sutton. Tremas is played by Anthony Ainley, who gives a great performance as the caring father. And like a lot of the episode sort of deals with their festivities around Tremas and Cassia's wedding, it's a lot of fun. It's this really nice Johnny Byrne's script and the direction, I think by John Black. It's this nice sort of happy, everything's fine sort of direction. Like, hey, it really makes you feel like, yeah, this utopia is an actual utopia. Like, the music itself is all upbeat. It's this sort of upbeat, almost medieval tune, but this medieval tune interpreted by synthesizers, so it's sort of sci-fi medieval, which I didn't think that was a genre that I would be talking about today, but here we are. Yeah, but there's sci-fi medieval music, and it's really nice. There's a lot of build-up around these characters. One criticism, once again, the Doctor doesn't do much in this episode. He watches on a screen, which I will say, that's a clever way of getting exposition to us. I don't think it really works the best in the way that perhaps it should. Yeah, you can get it helps you sort of understand who these characters are, what they're doing, and just who they are in general. But you really just don't get the entire story overall. It's like it's fine. I'll also even say that Matthew Waterhouse as Adric, when it's just him and Tom Baker, they actually have a pretty decent sort of rapport with each other. It's nothing great, but it's better than any of Adric's sort of appearances beforehand. He's built up to be a more, I don't want to say a more subtle character, but a character with more to him than just being the sort of annoyance that he was earlier on. It also feels like that also might just be because there's more for Adric to do here, because he was basically in the last story. I think I only mentioned him like once or twice because he's basically a non-presence throughout that last story. But overall, the Keeper of Traken Part 1 starts off great. We are right out of the gate getting an interesting story, a good story, a decent paced story with a couple of issues here and there about plotting and where really, and sort of how to do that exposition. So overall, I'm going to give the Keeper of Traken Part 1 an 8 out of 10. Alright, it is the 17th of October 2019, and I just finished watching Part 2 of The Keeper of Traken. This is going to sound a little silly, but after dealing with quite a bit of stories in Season 18 that haven't been very well paced, The Keeper of Traken feels like a breath of fresh air. Part 2 does some great things. Mainly, it ramps up the tension, adds in some plot points, gives us some depth to the villain, the Melkur, played by Jeffrey Beavers. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Surprise, surprise. If you've been listening to the audios into the other character that Jeffrey Beavers plays, and it builds up from sort of what the story was doing. It takes its time and basically tries to make sure we're telling a solid, good story that works and that has a good through line and has some fun characters. A lot of this episode has the Doctor teamed up with Tremas. essentially to get to the bottom of sort of the evil that's been happening, on Traken. Because Traken itself has been dealing with just this consistent onslaught of just evil. There's this bioelectronic thing called the Source that basically is what causes the air of goodness. And the Keeper is basically the keeper of the Source. He protects the Source from danger and from harm, and basically from being basically making sure that it stays safe, and and it doesn't get corrupted by some evil monstrous sort of thing, which is a good plot point, good solid plot point there. And it really does build. You don't get actually a lot of the planet Traken overall. Most of the events are basically in a couple of locations: this grove, this town square, the Keepers and the consuls' chambers, and Tremas's home in this episode. But there's a lot here that Johnny Byrne somehow takes just sort of the limitations of Doctor Sets and gives you a decent amount of world building. You feel like Traken is, as a world, is full of life and full of people, and he also sort of makes you feel like this story it's kind of like a Shakespeare story, like something like Shakespeare would have written, in that like a lot of the characters are kind of over the top, but that's kind of the point. Like Cassia is very much a Shakespearean villain. She's hypnotized under the thrall of the Melkur. The Melkur basically also then controls her and basically gives her laser eyes, which is just kind of cool. It's sort of a rule of cool. It kind of works. Like she's basically control, and she's basically conflicted. Because she kind of knows that the Melkur is evil and basically influencing her to be evil and attack her husband, and it's very much over the top, but it's also a lot of fun to watch because you have a character, because just the character is one of those where you're like, oh, she's not really evil, she's just being controlled, and it's quite fun. Also, Adric is paired up with Tremas's daughter Nissa, played by Sarah Sutton, who becomes a companion, but not in this story. She becomes a companion in the next story. It's very weird. Just the weird production schedule of season 18. And Adric actually seems to be written as a bit more crafty, a bit more resourceful. He feels like a bit more of a character who is well defined, and he's given things to do that kind of build him up. It's which is kind of refreshing because the character, he was basically a non-entity for Warriors Gate. State of Decay, he was just flat out annoying. In Full Circle, it was just his kind of introduction, which was all right, I guess. It wasn't perfect, but it was okay. It was a decent enough introduction to the character, even if really there isn't that much to the character to be built. But yeah, Adric is pretty decent here. There's also just a lot of fun politicking with the other consuls. Like Cassia tries to basically sow deceit that her husband. The idea is that he's been betraying Traken, even though there is like no evidence that he's actually ever been betraying Traken or Traken's trust. So like, the head council member is going to enter some sort of like repose with Cassia standing vigil over him, which they don't actually. Well, my one quibble: they don't always explain what some of these things mean. Which, I mean, it wouldn't come naturally in this episode, but But because obviously you sort of need the explanation to come to a character who wouldn't already know what these things are, like why, what is repose and what is keeping vigil, like how does that work? Um, but you'd have to talk to that directly to the doctor or Adric, and because they don't share a lot of scenes, that is kind of just you're left here like it sounds dangerous, but clear there isn't a clearly defined danger in what and what a lot of this means. It's just sort of okay. So we have this idea, we're kind of running with it, but you kind of have to let us. We may explain it later in the last two episodes, unless like the plot point gets dropped, which would be a shame. Um, but yeah, I'd also say the direction of this story is really good. It's a lot of the shots don't remain static, which can be a problem, but they don't go quite over the top into artsy like Warriors Gate kind of tried to do. Um, it's a really nice sort of directorial flair that some shots, just some slight movement of the camera, some slight changing up of the angles. It's all very subtly done, but it is pretty nice to watch. It's a lot of fun. It's and that's really a good summary of what the Keeper of Traken as a story has been. It's been a pretty enjoyable ride. It's we're halfway through and you have a good story. It's one of only two stories so far this season. The other, of course, being State of Decay. That so far has felt like a real Doctor Who story, like that we were really going back to a Doctor Who story. So overall, I'm going to give The Keeper of Traken Part 2 another 8 out of 10. Alright, it is the 17th of October 2019. I just finished watching Part 3 of The Keeper of Traken. We're going to start at the end of the episode because it's the Master the whole time. Yes, the Melkur is the Master, is TARDIS. The Master being, inside, which is plenty creepy, and plenty good. And he's back to he's the decayed one, as played by Jeffrey Beavers. Jeffrey Beavers plays this part amazingly. He does a really good job at playing the role just in this completely sinister manner where you get you get this real sense of danger as the Master lets his, for lack of a better term, master plan go into motion in this episode. He's at the point where he's like, yeah, no, I know that that the entire story has been building to, because you really didn't get a good idea of in the first two episodes what the Melkur's plan was, but the plan here is that it's sort of this idea that the entire story has been building up so the Master can basically get the power of the Source from the Keeper of Traken, basically by becoming the Keeper of Traken, and getting to sit in that chair and basically becoming a godlike power and being able to. I guess the idea is that the godlike powers will make him basically get be, for lack of a better term, regenerated, because he is basically regenerating to a complete he just becomes a completely new person, and gets just a big sense of basically new life as the master is, a totally and completely, regenerated. And it's great. There's a lot of stuff here where a lot of this episode is sort of just, it's the race to defeat the Melkur is what the episode sort of, I don't want to say promotes itself as, because it's not really promoting itself as this. It's just sort of being a story that's basically, hey, we need to find a way to get the master um, um, we need to get the master into a basically. So basically, it's like we need to basically try to save the day, and it's basically the big cliffhanger is that our heroes, the protagonists, the Doctor, Nyssa, Adric, and Tremas, have lost. Cassia is put into the source, and the master is able to take over, and it's really solid. Johnny Byrne's script. This is a part 3, and this is a part 3 that this is how you do a part 3 with a twist that is a last minute final act twist. That really just, it really shows a good job on just sort of how good a job that Byrne did to try to create this, basically just to create this, the way this story ends. I'd also have to say, this is a story where, this is an episode where Nyssa really gets to shine. Sarah Sutton gives a really solid performance. As as Nyssa here, as she basically she's trying to find her way to help. You have, you have a lot of the episode having the Doctor, Adric, and Tremas kind of just locked up, and there's also some genuine violence, and just the entire sequence of of the whole of just the whole Keeper dying and trying to be replaced. There's this real sense of drama here, because at least partially the story, you really see the chaos that the Keeper's death is causing in the world, that they don't have the immediate replacement to keep things basically in check. And it's a really solid episode for that. The entire story builds up around, basically builds up around this big reveal, and I really do, I really do think that Johnny Byrne did an excellent job of actually writing this story to build up to that reveal really well. And overall, this is probably the best episode of the story so far, and just it's it's a little plotty in places, but overall it's a pretty darn good episode. So overall, I'm going to give The Keeper of Traken Part 3 a 9 out of 10. Alright, it is the 18th of October 2019, and I just finished watching Part 4 of The Keeper of Traken, the thrilling conclusion to the story, and an episode that is genuinely great. Johnny Byrne's script is full of some great moments, some great bits of story, and just in general, some great atmosphere. One of the more interesting aspects. One of the more interesting aspects of the episode is this idea. This idea that the story. That the story is one of those. It's one of those sort of great conclusions here, because this is the episode where you really get to see all of the Master's plan in its sort of over the top glory. The Master is basically going to Jeffrey Beavers on television. Mind you, this is the one full episode where he gets to be the Master and the complete version of the character. And in this single episode, he goes full dictator. He gives just an incredibly memorable performance here. And he and Tom Baker have this great chemistry that carries over right into the audios and just any of the audios where Jeffrey Beavers appears as the Master. We still have a couple more after this that we are actually covering with him, luckily. But he is, as an actor, he exudes just who the Master is perfectly. He acts, completely malicious, completely evil. He is definitely in charge, and he definitely has built up himself as just the real evil character that he is, and not, and he doesn't, he does not. It's not like there's no compromises made for the fact that that he is evil. He is the Master, and you will obey him. You really see a lot of Traken nearly fall. Now, as a lot of the story is the Doctor and Tremas trying to find a way to beat the Master, while Adric and Nyssa actually end up being the ones who find the solution in the end, which is actually a nice, almost clever twist. I say that because it's a twist that happens because Adric and Nyssa spend a lot of the time in the TARDIS, and Nyssa gets to react to the size of the TARDIS, and we get a good explanation of what the TARDIS is, which is, I don't think we've really had one since Leela, which was really quite... It's this nice little detail that you kind of feel like you miss after a while. That, oh yeah, the TARDIS, remember, it's a thing that other people don't necessarily understand. And it's something that that most definitely the Doctor should explain. And I very much do like seeing where when other companions go into the TARDIS. And it turns out, what's nice is that at the end of this story, the day is saved and everything is happy, and you do really get a good sense that, yeah, everything is happy. This is a story with a happy ending. You have a new Keeper of Traken. Traken is stable. The Doctor and Adric go off for other adventures, which are great. But then you get that final scene where Tremas investigates this random grandfather clock that just appeared, and surprise, the Master's not actually dead. And he takes over Tremas's body, basically, meaning now Tremas, as played by Anthony Ainley, is now the Master, as played by Anthony Ainley. It's a solid conclusion, and it's a good twist. It's a twist that is punchy, and it works. It works incredibly well in the context of the story, and just it's one of those things. It's one of those twists where you you don't see it coming, but like if you know anything about Doctor Who, you probably know that that's how this story ends. Like this is the first time, and it means the Master is back. It's sort of this mission statement that the Master's back and is going to be not necessarily as more evil than ever, but he is kind of just back and ready to quite basically wreak havoc and find a way to basically wreak havoc on the universe, which is it's an excellent ending. It's really good. There isn't much I can actually say without just sort of reiterating that the entire story, the entire story, it's a really solid episode, and a really solid way of doing including the story. So overall, I'm going to give The Keeper of Traken Part 4 a 9 out of 10. That being said, we add up the scores and average them out to give The Keeper of Traken a final score of 8.5 out of 10. Thank you everybody once again for watching this installment of the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. As always, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you're not already. I do love hearing from you. And join me next time when we take a look at the final Tom Baker story and leave Tom Baker's 7-year run plus a bunch of audios behind us in Logopolis.